The book slipped from my fingers, landing with a soft thud on the polished hardwood floor. I barely noticed. My eyes were fixed on the man across the room, his dark hair tousled and green eyes sparkling with mischief. He was younger than me, probably by a good 5 years, but there was something magnetic about him that made my heart skip a beat. "Excuse me," I murmured, bending to retrieve the fallen novel. As I straightened, I found myself face to face with the stranger. "Allow me," he said, his voice smooth as honey. He plucked the book from my hands and examined the cover. "The Art of Second Chances. Interesting choice." I felt a blush creeping up my neck. "I'm Nora. I own the bookstore down the street." "Nolan," he replied, flashing a dazzling smile. "I'm a sales rep for Beacon Publishing. It's my first time at this fair." "Well, Nolan," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "welcome to the chaos. These book fairs can be overwhelming." He leaned in closer, his cologne teasing my senses. "Maybe you could show me the ropes?" "I'd love to get an insider's perspective." I hesitated, memories of past mistakes flickering through my mind. But something about Nolan's earnest expression made me push those thoughts aside. "Sure, why not? Let me introduce you to some of the regulars." As we made our way through the crowded convention hall, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was playing with fire. But the warmth of Nolan's presence was intoxicating, and I found myself laughing at his jokes and hanging on his every word. "Nora," a familiar voice called out. I turned to see my brother Robert approaching, his brow furrowed. "I've been looking everywhere for you. We need to discuss the new shipment." I introduced Nolan, watching as Robert's eyes narrowed slightly. "Nice to meet you," he said, his tone clipped. "Nora, can I speak with you privately for a moment?" Excusing ourselves, we stepped away from Nolan. Robert gripped my arm, his voice low and urgent. "What are you doing, Nora? That guy's trouble. I can feel it." I yanked my arm free, irritation flaring. "I'm a grown woman, Robert. I can take care of myself." "Like you did with Eric?" he shot back, instantly regretting his words. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean." "Save it," I snapped, turning on my heel. I marched back to Nolan, plastering on a smile. "Sorry about that. Where were we?" The rest of the afternoon flew by in a whirlwind of introductions and stolen glances. As the fair wound down, Nolan helped me pack up my booth. "I had a great time today," he said, his fingers brushing mine as he handed me a stack of books. "Would you like to grab dinner? I know a little Italian place around the corner." I hesitated, Robert's warning echoing in my mind, but the way Nolan looked at me like I was the only woman in the room made my resolve crumble. "I'd love to," I heard myself say. As we left the convention center, I caught sight of Robert watching us, his expression a mix of concern and disappointment. I pushed down the twinge of guilt and let Nolan guide me into the warm evening air. Over pasta and wine, Nolan regaled me with stories of his travels and dreams for the future. I found myself opening up, sharing bits of my own history that I usually kept locked away. "You're an amazing woman, Nora," Nolan said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "I feel like I've known you forever." As I gazed into his eyes, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered a warning. But the wine, the candlelight, and Nolan's intoxicating presence drowned it out. I was falling, and I didn't want to stop. Later that night, as I fumbled with my keys outside my apartment, Nolan leaned in close. "Can I see you again?" he murmured, his breath warm on my cheek. I nodded, my heart racing. As his lips met mine in a searing kiss, I knew I was in trouble. But for the first time in years, I didn't care about the consequences. I was ready to take a chance on love again, no matter where it might lead me. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, hardly recognizing the woman looking back at me. 6 months had passed since that fateful night at the book fair, and my world had shifted on its axis. Nolan had swept into my life like a whirlwind, and I'd let myself get caught up in the storm. "You look beautiful," Nolan's voice came from behind me. He wrapped his arms around my waist, nuzzling my neck. "Are you ready for dinner?" I nodded, pushing down the nagging doubt that had become my constant companion. We were celebrating our 6-month anniversary, and I'd pulled out all the stops with a form-fitting red dress and heels that made my legs look a mile long. As we settled into our corner booth at La Bella Vita, Nolan's favorite Italian restaurant, I couldn't help but notice the appreciative glances from other diners. Nolan beamed with pride, squeezing my hand across the table. "I'm the luckiest man in the world," he said, raising his glass of wine. "To us." I clinked my glass against his, forcing a smile. "To us." As we dug into our pasta, Nolan regaled me with stories from his latest business trip. I tried to focus, but my mind kept wandering to the conversation I'd had with Robert earlier that day. "He's using you, Nora," Robert had insisted, his voice tight with frustration. "Can't you see it? The fancy dinners, the lavish gifts, it's all smoke and mirrors." "You don't know him like I do," I'd argued, but even as the words left my mouth, I'd felt a flicker of uncertainty. "Nora? Earth to Nora." Nolan's voice snapped me back to the present. "Where'd you go just now?" I shook my head, plastering on a smile. "Sorry, just thinking about work. What were you saying?" Nolan's eyes narrowed slightly, but he continued his story. As I watched him talk, animated and charming as ever, a crazy idea began to form in my mind. Before I could talk myself out of it, I blurted, "Let's get married." Nolan's fork clattered to his plate. "What?" "Marry me," I repeated, my heart pounding. "I know it's fast, but when you know, right?" For a moment, Nolan just stared at me, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, a grin spread across his face. "You're serious?" I nodded, holding my breath. "Yes," he said, laughing. "Yes, let's do it." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of champagne and excited phone calls. As we stumbled back to my apartment, giggling and drunk on love and alcohol, I felt invincible. It wasn't until the next morning, nursing a pounding headache and a queasy stomach, that reality began to set in. I stared at the modest diamond ring Nolan had slipped onto my finger in the early hours of the morning, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. The shrill ring of my phone made me wince. Robert's name flashed on the screen, and I hesitated before answering. "Please tell me last night was some kind of elaborate joke," Robert said without preamble. I sighed, rubbing my temples. "It's not a joke, Rob. We're getting married." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Finally, Robert spoke, his voice low and controlled. "Nora, I'm begging you to reconsider. There's something off about Nolan. I've been doing some digging, and—" "Stop," I cut him off. "I don't want to hear it. I'm happy, Rob. Can't you just be happy for me?" "I want to be," he said softly, "but I have a bad feeling about this. Promise me you'll at least consider a prenup." I ended the call without answering, anger and doubt warring in my chest. As if summoned by my tumultuous thoughts, Nolan appeared in the doorway, looking unfairly handsome in rumpled clothes. "Morning, beautiful," he said, crossing the room to kiss me. "Ready to start planning our future?" As I gazed into his green eyes, sparkling with excitement, I made a decision. I would prove Robert wrong. Nolan and I would build a life together full of love and happiness, and nothing, not even my own nagging doubts, would stand in our way. Little did I know, those doubts were trying to warn me of the storm that was about to break over our heads, threatening to wash away everything I held dear. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight, its somber tone echoing through our empty house. I sat alone at the kitchen table, a cold cup of tea clutched between my trembling hands. Nolan was working late again, the third time this week. Our whirlwind romance had led to a quick marriage 6 months ago, but now the honeymoon phase felt like a distant memory. I tried to shake off the creeping sense of déjà vu, the echoes of my past relationship with Eric haunting me. The sound of keys in the lock made me jump. Nolan stumbled in, his tie askew and the scent of whiskey clinging to him. "You're still up?" he slurred, dropping his briefcase on the floor. I stood, crossing my arms. "We were supposed to have dinner together, remember? I waited for hours." Nolan waved his hand dismissively. "Big client, couldn't get away, you understand." "No, Nolan, I don't understand," I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "This isn't what I signed up for when we got married." His eyes narrowed, a flash of something cold and unfamiliar crossing his face. "What you signed up for? I didn't realize this was a business transaction, Nora." I recoiled as if slapped. "That's not what I meant, and you know it." Nolan loosened his tie, his movements jerky with anger. "Look, I'm working my ass off to provide for us. The least you could do is be a little grateful." "Grateful?" I sputtered. "For what? For being left alone every night? For feeling like a stranger in my own marriage?" He advanced on me, his voice low and dangerous. "Maybe if you weren't so needy, I wouldn't need to escape to the office all the time." Tears stung my eyes as I backed away. "What happened to you, Nolan? Where's the man I fell in love with?" For a moment his face softened, and I caught a glimpse of the charming, attentive man I'd married. But then the mask slipped back into place. "He grew up, Nora. Maybe you should try it sometime." With that, he stormed out of the kitchen and up the stairs. The slam of our bedroom door reverberated through the house, leaving me alone once again. I sank back into my chair, my mind reeling. How had we gotten here? Where had I gone wrong? The next morning I woke to an empty bed and a hastily scrawled note on the nightstand. Early meeting. Don't wait up. No apology, no explanation. As I got ready for work, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked tired, defeated. I hardly recognized her. At the bookstore, I went through the motions, my smile feeling forced as I helped customers. It wasn't until Robert stopped by during lunch that I felt a crack in my carefully constructed facade. "Nora?" he said, concern etched on his face. "What's wrong?" I opened my mouth to assure him everything was fine, but instead a sob escaped. Robert quickly flipped the open sign to closed and guided me to the back room. As I poured out my fears and frustrations, Robert listened patiently. When I finished, he took my hands in his expression grave. "Nora, there's something you need to know about Nolan," he said softly. "I've been doing some digging and, well, he's not who he says he is." My heart pounded in my chest. "What do you mean?" Robert hesitated, then pulled out a file from his briefcase. "His real name is Nathan Holloway. He's been involved in several fraud cases, always targeting wealthy women. And Nora, I think you might be his latest mark." I stared at the documents in front of me, my world tilting on its axis. Photos of Nolan or Nathan with other women, bank statements showing large transfers, police reports detailing accusations of theft and emotional manipulation. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "This can't be true. He loves me." Robert's eyes were filled with sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Nora, but you need to protect yourself. We need to act fast before he—" The shrill ring of my phone cut him off. Nolan's name flashed on the screen. With trembling hands, I answered. "Nora, darling," Nolan's smooth voice came through the line. "I've been thinking about last night. Let me make it up to you. I've booked us a surprise getaway for the weekend. Pack your bags. We leave tonight." As I met Robert's worried gaze, a chill ran down my spine. The man I thought I knew was a stranger, and I was trapped in a web of lies with no clear way out. My heart raced as I pulled into our driveway, hours earlier than expected. The publishing conference had ended abruptly due to a speaker's illness, and I'd seized the opportunity to surprise Nolan. Maybe, just maybe, we could salvage what was left of our crumbling marriage. The house was eerily quiet as I entered, my heels clicking against the hardwood floors. A trail of discarded clothing led up the stairs, and my stomach churned with dread. No, it couldn't be. Nolan wouldn't. But as I reached our bedroom door, I heard it, the unmistakable sounds of passion, punctuated by a woman's breathy giggles. My hand trembled as I pushed the door open. There, in our bed, the bed we'd shared as newlyweds, was Nolan, entangled with a woman I'd never seen before. Her long, blonde hair cascaded over her bare shoulders, a stark contrast to my own dark locks. "Nolan?" My voice came out as a strangled whisper. They both whipped around, shock etched on their faces. Nolan recovered first, his expression morphing from surprise to cold disdain. "Well, well," he drawled, making no move to cover himself. "Look who's home early." The blonde scrambled to pull the sheets around her, but Nolan stopped her with a lazy hand. "Don't bother, Sylvia. It's nothing Nora hasn't seen before, though I must say the view's a bit more impressive now, isn't it?" I stood frozen, unable to process the scene before me. How could you?" Nolan laughed, the sound grating against my ears. "Oh, come on, Nora. Did you really think a man like me would be satisfied with someone like you? Sylvia here is everything you're not, young, exciting, and carrying my child." The world tilted on its axis. "Your child?" Sylvia at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I didn't know he was married at first, and then—" "Save it," Nolan snapped. He turned his cold gaze back to me. "Well, now that the cat's out of the bag, we might as well get it all out in the open. I want a divorce, Nora. You're not the woman I married. You're just a sad, aging placeholder who can't keep up with me." Each word was a dagger to my heart. I stumbled backward, gripping the doorframe for support. "You bastard," I choked out. "I gave you everything." "And I took it," Nolan replied with a shrug. "That's business, sweetheart. Now, be a dear and close the door on your way out. Sylvia and I have some celebrating to do." In a daze, I fled down the stairs and out of the house, barely making it to the front lawn before my legs gave out. I collapsed onto the grass, sobs racking my body as the full weight of Nolan's betrayal crashed over me. I'm not sure how long I sat there, but eventually I became aware of a presence beside me. Robert knelt on the grass, his face a mask of concern. "Nora? What happened?" he asked gently. Through hiccuping sobs, I recounted the horrific scene I'd witnessed. Robert's expression darkened with each word. "I'll kill him," he growled, starting to rise. I grabbed his arm, shaking my head. "No, don't. He's not worth it." Robert sank back down, pulling me into a fierce hug. "You're right. He's not. But you are, Nora. You deserve so much better than this. As I clung to my brother, a spark of something ignited in my chest. It wasn't just pain or heartbreak, it was anger. White-hot, righteous fury. He thinks he can just discard me, I said, my voice growing stronger. Use me up and throw me away like I'm nothing. Robert pulled back, studying my face. What are you thinking? I stood, brushing grass from my clothes. My tears had dried, replaced by a steely determination. I'm thinking it's time Nolan learned that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Will you help me? A slow smile spread across Robert's face. Little sister, I thought you'd never ask. What's the plan? As we walked away from the house that had once been my home, I felt a shift inside me. The old Nora, trusting, naive, easily manipulated, was gone. In her place stood a woman forged in the fires of betrayal, ready to fight back. Nolan had no idea what was coming for him. The harsh fluorescent lights of Robert's office did nothing to soften the blow of the documents spread before me. Bank statements, credit card bills, and property records, all painting a damning picture of Nolan's deception. He's been siphoning money from your joint accounts for months, Robert explained, his voice tight with barely contained anger. And that's not all. Look at this. He slid a file across the desk. Inside were photos of Nolan with various women, all bearing a striking resemblance to Sylvia. My stomach churned as I flipped through them, each image a fresh wound to my already battered heart. How? I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. How did you get all this? Robert's expression softened. I've had my suspicions about Nolan for a while. When you told me what happened, I called in some favors. Nora, I'm so sorry. I should have pushed harder, warned you sooner. I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. No, I should have listened to you from the start. God, I've been such a fool. Hey, Robert said firmly, gripping my hand. You're not a fool. You're a woman who chose to see the best in someone. Nolan's the fool for throwing away the best thing that ever happened to him. His words, meant to comfort, only fueled the fire burning inside me. He needs to pay, Robert, for everything he's done, to me, to those other women. I won't let him get away with this. Robert leaned back, studying me carefully. What are you thinking? I stood, pacing the room as my mind raced. We have evidence of his fraud, his affairs. We could go to the police, but that feels too clean. I want him to suffer like I've suffered, to feel the humiliation, the betrayal. Nora, Robert warned, we have to be careful. Revenge can be a dangerous game. I whirled to face him, my eyes blazing. And what he did to me wasn't dangerous. He used me, Robert, stole from me, made me question my worth, my sanity. He deserves everything coming to him, and more. A long moment passed as Robert considered my words. Finally, he nodded. All right, if we're doing this, we're doing it smart. No room for error. For the next few hours, we pored over the evidence, crafting a plan that would bring Nolan's carefully constructed world crashing down around him. As the sun began to rise, casting a pale glow through the office windows, we had our strategy. Are you sure about this? Robert asked one last time. Once we set this in motion, there's no going back. I thought of Nolan's cruel words, of Sylvia in our bed, of the countless other women he'd manipulated and discarded. My resolve hardened. I'm sure, I said, my voice steady. He chose the wrong woman to cross. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Nolan. We need to talk. Meet me at the house at noon. Bring the divorce papers. I showed Robert the message, a grim smile playing at my lips. Looks like our timeline just moved up. Robert nodded, his expression mirroring my own determination. Then let's get to work. It's time Nolan learned that actions have consequences. As we gathered our evidence and finalized our plan, I felt a shift within myself. The pain and betrayal were still there, a dull ache in my chest, but they were overshadowed by a newfound strength. Nolan had tried to break me, to reduce me to nothing more than a discarded trophy wife. But he'd underestimated me. I glanced at my reflection in the office window, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me. Gone was the naive, trusting Nora who had fallen for Nolan's charms. In her place stood a woman forged in fire, ready to fight for justice, not just for herself, but for every woman Nolan had ever wronged. As Robert and I left the office, our plan set in motion, I felt a surge of anticipation. Nolan thought he was calling me to end our marriage. Little did he know, he was walking into a trap of his own making. The game was about to change, and I was holding all the cards. My heels clicked against the polished marble floor of Nolan's office building, each step fueling my determination. Robert walked beside me, his presence a comforting anchor in the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Are you ready for this? he asked as we approached Nolan's floor. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders, as ready as I'll ever be. The receptionist's eyes widened as we strode past her desk. Mr. Holloway is in a meeting. Not anymore. Robert cut her off, pushing open Nolan's office door without knocking. Nolan looked up from his desk, surprise quickly morphing into annoyance. What the hell is this? I'm busy. Oh, I think you'll want to make time for this conversation, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Nolan's eyes narrowed as he took in Robert's presence. What's going on, Nora? I tossed a thick folder onto his desk. What's going on is that your little charade is over, Nathan Holloway. The color drained from Nolan's face as he flipped through the documents, bank statements, photos, police reports. Did you really think you could fool me forever? I interrupted, my anger finally boiling over. Did you think I was too stupid, too desperate to see through your lies? Nolan's shock gave way to a sneer. Well, you certainly fell for them easily enough. Poor, lonely Nora, so eager for love she'd believe anything. Robert took a menacing step forward, but I held up a hand to stop him. This was my battle. You're right, I admitted, my voice low. I did fall for your act, but that's over now. We know everything, Nolan. The fraud, the affairs, all of it. For a moment, fear flashed in Nolan's eyes. Then he leaned back, a smug smile playing at his lips. So what? It's your word against mine. And let's face it, sweetheart, who's going to believe the jilted, aging wife over the successful young executive? That would be me, Robert interjected, his voice cold. Nolan, meet Robert Chambers, your boss. The smug smile vanished from Nolan's face. What? Robert's grin was predatory. That's right. And I've got to say, I'm not thrilled with an employee who uses company resources to defraud his wife and carry on multiple affairs. Nolan scrambled to his feet, panic setting in. Now, wait a minute. We can work this out. I'm sure we can come to some kind of arrangement. Oh, we're well past that, I said, relishing the fear in his eyes. You see, Nolan, you made one crucial mistake. You underestimated me. I pulled out my phone, playing a recording of Nolan's earlier confession. His face crumpled as he realized the depth of his predicament. Here's what's going to happen, Robert said, his tone leaving no room for argument. You're going to sign these papers, admitting to your fraud and agreeing to a very generous divorce settlement for Nora. Then you're going to quietly resign and never show your face in this industry again. Nolan's eyes darted between us, searching for an escape. Finding none, he slumped in defeat. And if I refuse? I leaned in close, my voice barely above a whisper. Then we take everything to the police. Your choice, Nathan. With shaking hands, Nolan signed the papers. As Robert led him out to process his resignation, I stayed behind, surveying the office that had been the center of so many of Nolan's lies. A photo on his desk caught my eye, Nolan and I on our wedding day, both smiling brightly at the camera. I picked it up, studying the woman I used to be. She seemed so naive, so trusting. The sound of the door opening made me turn. Nolan stood there, defeated and small. Why? I asked, the question that had haunted me for months finally escaping my lips. Why did you do it? Nolan shrugged, unable to meet my eyes. Because I could. Because it was easy. I set the photo face down on his desk. Well, I hope it was worth it. As I walked out of his office for the last time, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The battle wasn't over. I knew Nolan wouldn't go down without a fight, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Little did I know, Nolan had one last desperate move to make, one that would push me to my very limits and test everything I thought I knew about myself. The shrill ring of my phone pierced the quiet of my apartment. Robert's name flashed on the screen. Nora, he's on his way. Robert's voice was urgent. Our source at his hotel says Nolan just left in a rage. He's coming for the evidence. My heart raced as I sprang into action. I'm on it. Are you close? 10 minutes out. Be careful, Nora. He's desperate. I hung up and rushed to gather the damning files we'd collected. Just as I was shoving them into my bag, I heard the screech of tires outside. Peering through the curtains, I saw Nolan's car haphazardly parked across my driveway. Panic surged through me as I realized I was trapped. I dialed 911, my fingers trembling. 911. What's your emergency? Before I could respond, a thunderous crash echoed through the house. Nolan had broken down the door. Help, I whispered into the phone. He's here. I dropped the phone, leaving the line open, and grabbed the heaviest object within reach, a crystal vase, a wedding gift from Nolan's parents. Bitter irony. Nolan's footsteps pounded up the stairs. Nora, he bellowed. Where are you, you conniving bitch? I pressed myself against the wall beside the bedroom door, Vase raised, heart hammering in my chest. Nolan burst in, wild-eyed and disheveled. "Where are the files?" he snarled, tearing through drawers and shelves. "Looking for these." I stepped into view, clutching my bag. He whirled around, his face contorted with rage. "Give them to me. Now." "Or what, Nolan?" I challenged, my voice steadier than I felt. "You'll hit me? Add assault to your growing list of crimes?" He lunged forward, but I was ready. The vase connected with his shoulder, shattering on impact. Nolan stumbled, howling in pain and fury. I bolted for the door, but he recovered quickly, grabbing my ankle. I crashed to the floor, the contents of my bag spilling everywhere. "You've ruined everything," Nolan shouted, crawling towards the scattered papers. "My career, my reputation, all because you couldn't just let it go." I kicked at him, scrambling to gather the evidence. "You did this to yourself, Nolan. Every lie, every betrayal, that was all you." He grabbed a fistful of my hair, yanking me back. "I should have known you'd be trouble. Just like all the others, too stupid to know when to quit." The sound of sirens pierced the air, growing closer. Nolan's eyes widened in panic. "It's over," I said, wrenching free from his grasp. "The police are coming. Robert's on his way. You've lost, Nolan." For a moment, he looked utterly defeated. Then a chilling smile spread across his face. "If I'm going down, I'm taking you with me." He lunged again, this time wrapping his hands around my throat. I clawed at his face, gasping for air, black spots dancing in my vision. Suddenly, the pressure vanished. I gulped in precious oxygen, my ears ringing. Robert stood over us, a baseball bat in his hands. Nolan lay crumpled on the floor, groaning. "Nora, are you okay?" Robert helped me to my feet, his face etched with concern. I nodded, massaging my throat. "I'm fine, just get him out of here." As if on cue, police officers swarmed into the room, quickly subduing Nolan. I watched in a daze as they led him away in handcuffs, his parents arriving just in time to witness their son's disgrace. Mrs. Holloway approached me, tears in her eyes. "Nora, I'm so sorry. We had no idea." I held up a hand, unable to deal with their apologies. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me shaky and exhausted. Robert guided me downstairs, past the wreckage of my home. As we stepped outside, I was blinded by flashing lights and a sea of curious neighbors. "It's really over," I whispered, the full weight of everything crashing down on me. Robert squeezed my shoulder. "You did it, Nora. You stood up to him. You won." But as I watched Nolan being loaded into a police car, his eyes locked on mine with a mixture of hatred and something else, a promise of retribution. I couldn't shake the feeling that this victory came at a cost I wasn't yet fully aware of. The battle was won, but the war? That remained to be seen. The courtroom fell silent as the judge cleared his throat. I sat rigid, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, Robert a steadying presence beside me. Across the aisle, Nolan slouched in his chair, a shadow of the charming man I'd once loved. "In the matter of Nora Chambers versus Nathan Holloway," the judge began, his voice echoing through the room, "this court finds in favor of the plaintiff." A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. I closed my eyes, relief washing over me in waves. "Mr. Holloway," the judge continued, his tone sharp, "your actions were not only a betrayal of your marriage vows, but a violation of basic human decency. This court orders you to pay Mrs. Chambers alimony in the amount of $5,000 per month for the next 10 years, as well as covering all legal fees associated with this case." Nolan's face contorted in fury. He leapt to his feet, pointing an accusing finger at me. "This is all your fault. You've ruined me." The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. "Mr. Holloway, one more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt. Sit down." As Nolan was forcibly returned to his seat by his lawyer, I caught Sylvia's eye in the back of the courtroom. Her hand rested protectively on her swollen belly, her expression a mix of shame and relief. I gave her a small nod. She wasn't to blame for Nolan's deceptions. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Robert fielded their questions while I stood in stunned silence, the reality of my victory slowly sinking in. "Nora," a familiar voice called out. I turned to see Hector, my favorite customer from the bookstore, pushing through the crowd. "I heard what happened. Are you okay?" His genuine concern brought tears to my eyes. "I am now," I said, surprising myself by reaching for his hand. The next few months passed in a blur. Nolan's affair and fraudulent activities became front-page news, leading to his termination and public humiliation. His parents, horrified by the extent of his deceptions, cut ties with him. Last I heard, he'd left town, penniless and alone. Sylvia reached out to me, apologizing profusely. We met for coffee, and I was surprised to find myself comforting her. "He fooled us both," I told her, "but we're stronger than his lies." As the dust settled, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. The bookstore thrived, becoming a sanctuary for other women healing from betrayal. I started a support group, sharing my story and helping others find their strength. And then there was Hector. Our friendship blossomed slowly, cautiously into something more. He was patient, kind, everything Nolan wasn't. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen and valued. On a crisp autumn evening a year after the trial, Hector and I strolled through the park near my home. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, a fitting backdrop for the peace I felt. "You know," Hector said, squeezing my hand, "I'm in awe of you, Nora. After everything you've been through, you're still so open, so loving. You're the strongest person I know." I stopped, turning to face him. "I couldn't have done it without you, without Robert, without everyone who supported me. I learned that true strength comes from vulnerability, from letting people in." Hector's eyes shone with emotion. "I love you, Nora. You know that, right?" My heart swelled. "I love you too, Hector, and for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid to say it." As we continued our walk, hand in hand, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the betrayal, the fight for justice, it had all shaped me into the woman I was now. A woman who knew her worth, who refused to be defined by someone else's lies. Nolan had tried to break me, but instead, he'd forged me into something unbreakable. I was no longer the naive, trusting Nora who had fallen for his charms. I was stronger, wiser, and finally, truly happy. The sweet taste of Riv had faded, replaced by something far more satisfying. The knowledge that I had survived, thrived, and come out the other side stronger than ever. As Hector and I walked towards our future together, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them. Not alone, but surrounded by love, support, and the unshakable belief in my own resilience. The end was just the beginning, and I couldn't wait to see what came next.